Hello everyone, welcome to Homemakers Radio. And if you are listening from the channel, please click on the description below and go to the post where I have embedded this video and see a summary and some other photographs and the names and titles of things that I have referred to, plus some links that you might benefit from. And this is designed to listen to as you walk or as you work. And I am excited to be alive today, and I hope you are too. And several of the things I have been reading have inspired that wonderful feeling. And even in these crazy times that we're living in, where the powers that be are trying to make us hate our lives, we are going to come out better on the other side, loving life, being more productive, being smarter, healthier, and more creative, and having happier close families, and just bonding with our own people and enjoying our great God. And we have two things going for us, and one is that we have a great God, and the second is that we are alive. So while we're alive, let's just do the best we can. So for homemaking and for just home living or just living life, maybe you'll find something here. And before you go today to go about your business, and I always suggest that you use these videos for sorting out a box, hanging up some clothing, getting into a mess you just dread. You'll have company while you go. And so today, before I go, I want to share my teacup. And I'm wearing a dress I made from a Laura Ashley pattern many years ago. Maybe I'll show it to you. I can't get a picture of it, but I might be able to back up here and show you this dress. Try to see. It's quite long, and I'm wearing the little Jane Austen boots with it. Okay, so what I would like to show you also is my brown paper challenge item of the day. Do you remember these? You have to buy them at the Dollar Tree or at somewhere else, and they're hard to find, but I was putting them on the saucer of a teacup when I had anyone over for tea or when we had the ladies fellowship here. But they're hard to find sometimes, and then you have to buy them. So I decided I was going to use my paper bag challenge to make one of these. So all I did was I folded this in half, and then I laid it on the edge of the brown paper and cut it out, and then I folded it several times and cut out the little the little sections here. See there? That's how you do that. And so then that is going to go on this plate. Now, most people are using large cups and not the saucers. But for those of you that still like to use a saucer, you know, it gets moisture here and water, and then you pick up your cup and you drip it on yourself from the bottom here. So that will absorb all that water and all that tea. So I just wanted to tell you that. Do you think I'll win today with my descendants on the brown paper challenge? And I avoided using pens or any markers, any felt tip markers, anything like that, because that could, when it got wet, bleed off onto the saucer. So, and I just love this cup. It's another one of those Stretch Call Gracie teaware, which you can actually buy these on the web for the same price as you would get them in the stores. And a lot of people say, well, you know, you have to pay the postage. But I'm telling you, you're not taking into account the time you're spending away from home, plus the cost of gas these days is very, very high. So I'll pay the postage to have someone else endure the aggravation and bring it. I mean, I do have to go out. I don't wear a mask, though. What I do is I take my list and I take it into the store, and I look at that as I go, and then I look at the merchandise, and I put it in, and I ignore the fiery darts of people's eyes who look so accusingly at me. I have never worn a mask and never will, but they have stopped examining people at the door of these businesses now. They have stopped saying anything to you, and they can't afford to hire anyone to do it anymore, to examine everybody, so they've just stopped. So a lot of people are taking the opportunity not to muzzle themselves. So ladies, today I'm just delighted to start out with I'll be talking to you afterwards, but I wanted to, because my voice tends to give out, I want to do the reading first. And then those of you who are not interested in some of the other trivialities that I speak of, I can tell you that the reading is over and you can turn it off, because there will be other things. I'm going to talk about other things that I know that you're interested in, so if you wanted to continue. But I want to start out with the McGuffey's Third Reader. I love this hardback. You can get them in a soft cover too. But this is the Third Reader, and as I said before, these readers are not according to grade. That's not third grade. That's just the third in line. They do advance up to the fifth and sixth. But one thing that we need to know is that what has really ruined education in the public school system is the grade system and the grading system, because not everybody is the same level of everything all year at the same time. You might have a child at home who really is good at mathematics but hasn't quite grasped reading. So what you need to do is just stay where you are in reading, and if it takes several years, just stay at that level. You're not in a hurry. And it's like in this movie that I liked called Finding Normal. Remember that movie? And this little girl was homeschooled, and she was asked what grade she was in, and she says, well, I'm not really in one particular grade, and in some subjects I'm in third grade, and other subjects I'm in fifth grade. And so you'll have a child that's at college level in reading, and then maybe a little bit more laid back in other subjects. So you should not be rushing it through. So that's why I say when you read a sentence out of here, a paragraph, you can take all the time you want. This is what real freedom is. It's not being rushed through a conveyor belt or a system or a factory the way the schools tried to do. And another thing that's really bad about a school is that they line you up according to age, and you're all with one age group, and learning is not very efficient that way, because in real life a family has different age groups. So we have a father and a mother, probably they are have a difference in age, and then we have the older children and the baby, and they all interact in this social system that God created, and that's the best way to learn. And the impact of your life on your children's life is really going to be better than even the education. Just learning how to talk and how to take care of themselves, how to sanitation and nutrition, and how to grow things. And even if you're not agrarian, you can get yourself a little container and some dirt and grow something and teach your children about this. And so really, they're going to be better off. And if you're concerned about smartness and being smarter, I've heard that a lot. I don't see any evidence in the Bible that it says we have to be smart, but we do have to have some knowledge, and we do have to know how to apply it. But if you're concerned about them being smarter, they're already going to be smarter than at home, because they can see how things work at home. And this is the way that works best for children. Now, ladies, I'm going to read you lesson 8. They have it in Roman numerals. So that's another thing. You're going to have to teach your children Roman numerals. And it's called Select Sentences and Paragraphs. Now, I will be reading to you more about home and household hints and life in general afterwards. So the first thing is the rule. There's always a rule at the beginning of these books, and it's always at the beginning of every chapter, and I love them. The rule could be the lesson for the day. You don't really have to go on. Okay, here's the rule. It's called Select Sentences and Paragraphs, and it's just a little list of maxims for people to live by. Rule: read so slowly that you can speak all the words distinctly. Do not drawl or whine your words. Now, I suppose whining means more of a nasal, and you need to know some of the elements of speech are. We have the upper resonators and the lower resonator, and you vary them, and then you have your breath. I forget what those are called. There's the vocals, subvocals, aspirates, and on. You'll learn that out of these books here, but you alternate your upper resonator and your lower resonator, and you alternate your breath, and the words that are not impeded by the tongue, those are important. And so this makes it pleasant, and keeps you from monotone, keeps the children from just having a nasal voice. So it says, read so slowly that you can speak all the words distinctly. Do not drawl or whine your words. I always thought whining was more the upper resonator. Okay, let me read a couple of these. If you behave better in one place than another, let that place be at home. Isn't that wonderful? Because the world has tried to tell us that good manners and creativity and invention comes from the factories and from the world and from society out there. But we've always known that it comes from the home. So if you have good manners at home, they'll flow. You don't have to change your demeanor around people because the manners will flow outwardly. And if you learn to love and respect things at home and people at home, that's going to flow outward, and you will never go out and run down your own family or your own children. Do not talk negatively about your children to other people, because even if they don't know you're doing it, they sense something is wrong. It can give them a deep feeling of shame and inferiority, and things, their habits, and they're growing up, they're growing, and they're overcoming some things. That needs to be worked out at home between the parents. And kids don't like to find out that they've been talked about by their parents to other people, and then go and visit them and find out that they know all their faults. And so we need to keep this in the home. So if you behave better in one place than in another, let that place be at home. To say little and perform much is the characteristic of a great mind. Now, we had the Spencerian penmanship booklets, and they had sentences to write out, and one of them was, promise little and do much. In other words, keep your mouth shut most of the time, and then work out your ideas and show things, show your life, show your beliefs by your works, the way James says. Show your beliefs, show what you have. Don't go around saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to, because there are people that will mock you and they will try to thwart you. So, to say little and perform much is the characteristic of a great mind. Promise little and do much. So there are just a number of things here I wanted to skip around. Never leave that to be done the next hour, which may properly be done right now, nor dare to put off till tomorrow the business which you may as well begin today. That's a hard one. I tended to be tired most of my life, especially raising children, and I would say, I think I'll just leave that. My rest is more important, and I do believe that for a mother, her rest is more important. And so because of that, I developed very bad habits, which I'm having to straighten out now. But, there's always hope, and I might amount to something someday. And as long as we're alive, there's hope for change. Now, I'm reading out of this book, The Jane Austen Diet by Brian Kozlowskis, and I've made this charming picture of Pemberley in the background. I think it would be nice to go look up some of the quotes of William Fitzwilliam Darcy, because he talked about pride being under good regulation and how he was raised with good principles, but he was left alone to pursue them in conceit. And this is the problem with people everywhere, even Christians, is that you can have a knowledge of what's right, but if you don't pursue it, like it's said in the last book, the last chapter that we read about the Bible, is read it not for show, but for what it will do to the heart. In fact, I think I could read that again for you. It said, read for improvement and not for show. The great object of reading is to improve your minds in useful knowledge, to establish the hearts in virtue, and to prepare you for the right performance of the duties of life. I tend to be very jealous that my children got this at an early impressionable age, and I didn't. This was all left out of the public school. The public school was so lacking in this spiritual aspect, that it was all mechanical, useless things that we could not use. We did learn to read and to write, but it could have been better, because when they learn to read and write, they're writing beautiful things that have meaning to them, that give them a light in their eyes. As a matter of fact, when the communist system left Russia, the I guess you call him, is the president? Is there a president now? I don't know if he's president or prime minister, but he said that he wanted the Bible back in the schools because of the vacant, vapid look in the eyes of their youth. I just thought that was wonderful. And so these books were valuable because they put things about the Bible and things from the Bible in them. But I am now going to Brian Kozlowski's book, because I have decided, ladies, have you ever noticed over the years that people could get these honorary degrees? In other words, they didn't really study in the university, but because they had written a book, or they had accomplished something in public life, or they had been a mayor, or they had been a senator, some of these universities would give them an honorary degree certificate. So today, because I've liked some of the things I've read in Brian Kozlowski's book, I've decided to make him an honorary grandson. So maybe I can straighten up some of his salty language too, since he's going to be part of the family. So anyway, that's the only degree that I had that I could give to him, is this honor. So ladies, I am reading chapter 1 now, called Universal Truths, Back to Austen's Body Basics. Now, if you're a man and you're listening, you can still benefit from this, because a lot of us got too fat because of the commercial foods, and we weren't aware. I really don't blame people for being overweight, because I don't think it's because they were gluttonous, and I don't think it was because they didn't get enough activity. I really think a lot of it was the bad food that we're eating, whether you're eating out or you're buying commercial food, and combined with pharmaceuticals, makes it all stick to you. And so I'm hoping that if you're a man and you're listening to this, you can see that the natural way, we will naturally be a lot thinner. And we don't want to put pressure on anybody, because that only just makes people more anxious. So I would like to start chapter 1. Now, I think I skipped this chapter because I was anxious to get to some of the other things, but I have been out this morning walking around before breakfast and before the tractors and the cars start going by on the farm road, and before the noise begins. And I did it on purpose and pretended I was in Austen land. It's not hard to do when you live around an area like this. In fact, the first scene of the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, where Lizzie was going for a walk or a run, and she was standing on a hill overlooking a valley where two men on horses were perusing an area that one of them thought they might like to purchase, and it looked very much like around here. Only I don't think people really appreciate it. In spite of the beautiful meadows and pastures, you never see anyone walking in them. You never see anyone with an easel painting a picture. You don't see anyone sitting down for a picnic in them. It's just so neglected. I really enjoy going out so I don't neglect these beautiful trees and the land. So you want the perfect Jane Austen body, preferably one of those happiest of creatures with Lizzie's sparkling energy, Emma's smart appetite, Eleanor's elegant figure, and Marianne's uncommonly brilliant skin. Join the club. Getting your own lovely, blooming, healthful body straight out of an Austen novel is one of the biggest fantasies in English fiction. I hope that Brian will sometime write a book about all the male characters in the Jane Austen world, in her books, because some of them said some things. She actually was quite accurate, because she made her characters from observing and listening to people who came into their parlor to talk to her father, who was a minister, and there were all kinds of people with all kinds of idiosyncrasies and problems. And so she accurately quoted some of the things that she heard in these conversations from the men. And I'd really like to see a little volume with all the quotes of all the men, because some of them had to deal with character. So let me back up here. Getting your own lovely, blooming, healthful body straight out of an Austen novel is one of the biggest fantasies in English fiction, on par with meeting your own real-life Mr. Darcy and kindly expecting him to propose twice, and it will remain just another fantasy unless we unlock some of Jane's most important facts first. I've come to recognize them as Jane's universal truths. The Regency body basics repeated throughout her novels, as true today as they were in 1800. They're what the healthiest bodies in Austen world intuitively understand about health itself. They also happen to clash with some of the peskiest prides and prejudices of the 21st century, those false ideas about our bodies, as unhelpful to Jane's embrace of life as they've become for us. Because what most of us believe healthy bodies should look, act, and think like are simply not Austen's ideas of happiness at all. Rather, to obtain both health and happiness in Austen world and our own is to allow Jane to set a few things straight. Let's get back to the forgotten body mantras that Lizzie, Darcy, and all the assorted Dashwoods fundamentally acknowledge to be true. Now, I know that it's true that someone who does not have a high opinion of themselves will probably neglect their bodies more. And when someone comes along who loves them, who cares about them, and who sees their true potential, and they listen to this and become more confident, then you'll see that their appearance improves, and they can even lose weight because they're not taking their solace in foods. They're starting to understand things. And this is the beauty of homeschooling, because your kids will go to good sources for comfort and for self-improvement, and they need to have a good opinion of themselves as being creations of God and as being brought into this world and being a miracle. You're all a miracle of someone's parents. You know, when you were first born, they were very proud of that. And if you can go back and remember that you were wanted and loved, and so, and even if you weren't, God loves you and has a reason. He has a reason that you were created. And so that we don't need to go to vegging out on movies and food and things like that. We can go into this, you know, everybody says, oh, I want to be in the Austen world and I want to live in a different time. Look, you're here for a purpose, and you're in this world this time for a purpose. So you can just change anything you want, just like going out for a walk in the morning and getting a lot of fresh air, eating fresh food, and many other things that we're going to discuss. I'm going to have a Jane Austen day someday and have people over that admire this life, and we are going to dress the way and eat the way and sing the way that they did, and we're going to have assignments, we're going to have letter writing and reading, we're going to have games, and we're going to have singing. And so that's one of my plans for the future. And I think that the boys will like it as well, because we're going to have a lot of things that the men used to do. They're what the healthiest bodies of Austen world intuitively understand about health itself. They also happen to clash with some of the peskiest prides and prejudices of the 21st century, those false ideas about our bodies as unhelpful to Jane's embrace of life as they've become for us. So, universal truth number 1, every body is different. First, to line up all the beautiful bodies in Austen world, it is to clarify one thing. There is no one perfect Jane Austen body. Healthy, happy, handsome bodies come in every possible variation of form, says Eleanor in Sense and Sensibility, a statement anyone who has personally struggled with body image issues could almost kiss Austen for making. I think it's remarkable that Brian has drawn this out of the Jane Austen stories. He has seen clues in there, just like many of us can when we read an old book from the 1800s. And I have often told you this, that, well, even in Wives and Daughters, they said this or did this or whatever, that you can't help writing a book or a story in your time that doesn't reveal some of the practices of the time. So we can glean a lot out of this. Handsome bodies come in every possible variation of form, says Eleanor in Sense and Sensibility, a statement anyone who has personally struggled with body image issues could almost kiss Austen for making. It's such a refreshing alternative to the narrow definitions of fit bodies blasted to us in modern magazines, movies, billboards, and the internet. Indeed, to read Austen is to get a much-needed reality check from all that errant nonsense. One body size does not fit all. And I'll say the same thing about food and about medication and about just anything that anyone, education, one size does not fit all. Everybody's an individual, and everybody needs their own individual recommendations and style. And Austen believed it so fully, her novels contain some of the most realistically diverse bodies in English literature. Her leading ladies run the gamut of attractive shapes and sizes. There's Anne Elliot on the smaller end of the spectrum with a naturally slender form in Persuasion, yet Lydia Bennet is equally alluring in Pride and Prejudice, being a curvy, stout, well-grown girl. Harriet Smith joins the body diversity in Emma. She was a very pretty girl, short, plump, and fair. I noticed in old books how often plumpness was admired, and how now it went over the top. So too does Mrs. Croft. She was my favorite character in the movie Persuasion. I really liked her. She had the same amount of wrinkles as I had, and I really liked Mrs. Croft. And so too does Mrs. Croft in Persuasion, having a certain squareness to her figure, though remaining one of the fittest women in Austen world nonetheless, full of energy and blessed with excellent health. Remember, she said when she was asked about, how did she fare when she went on the ship journeys with her captain husband, she said, I'm in better health when I'm there. Austen herself was naturally tall and slender, shaped like a fire poker, some said, but she never forced any of her characters into an identical standard of slimness. Neither does she praise the same beautiful body type twice. These are extraordinary insights for a woman who knew nothing about the genetics or DNA. But as science continues to prove, and as Austen hinted 3 centuries ago, everybody has a true size for rational happiness. A biological build as unique as our eye or skin color. My baseline body type is different from yours. Lizzie's is different from Lydia's. Slimming down to your own true size is certainly welcomed in Austen world. But one-size-fits-all standards of perfection are not. Instead, getting to a nice, comfortable size, being comfortable in your own skin, is Jane's truer message, one repeatedly echoed in Pride and Prejudice. When Mr. Darcy snubs Lizzie at the opening ball, finding her body tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me, he had detected with a critical eye more than one failure of perfect symmetry in her form. Lizzie responds in a way we all universally admire. She doesn't cry in front of her self-loathing mirror or starve herself for a month. She merely laughs it off among her friends, finding Darcy's narrow beauty standards absolutely ridiculous. If you've ever been told that you're funny looking or that you're ugly, that can be very, very devastating. And so what you have to do, you have to train your children. This will happen to them, that you do not use other people's standards as final authority, and that if these people are not what kind of profession are these people in? Are they professional, analyzers or what, And even then, it doesn't matter, but, ask yourself the question and train your children that this will happen. People will say that, but it's not true. The fake photoshopped bodies in magazines. Oh, let me just go back here. To laugh with Lizzie is to take a step towards sanity, something clearly needed in our own world of critical eyes and impossible standards of perfection. Now, when I say that when you're a child, someone might tell you you're funny looking, or that you're not very pretty, it is so sad, and I think everybody has gone through that, where people look down on you because you don't look like their standard, or maybe they're looking at back in the 50s, people did see the magazines and the movies that promoted, even Good Housekeeping and Family Circle and Women's Day always had these movie stars on them. I don't know what relation that would have to the ordinary person or the homemaker, but people would look at those and then conclude that other people weren't up to the standard. And so you need to explain all this to your children, because inevitably there will be someone who will tell them something like that will make them think less of themselves. We cannot let this happen. The fake, to laugh with Lizzie is to take a step towards sanity, something dearly needed in our own world of critical eyes and impossible standards of perfection. The fake photoshopped bodies in magazines, the digitally tweaked physiques in movies, they're all like the ideal accomplished woman Miss Bingley blathers on about in Netherfield. I never saw such a woman, Lizzie rightly rebuffs. She didn't exist in 1813. She doesn't exist today. Pictures of perfection make me sick and wicked, Austen famously fumed, inviting us all into the exquisite freedom of feeling the same. So here's, he's got these cute little pink boxes here. I'm going to read this Regency reality check. If you're having trouble laughing along with Lizzie, researchers at the University of South Florida, Tampa, recommend recalibrating your body's perfection standards. Put down the magazine, go to a public place, a shopping mall will suffice, in absence of a Regency ballroom, and do a little people watching. You'll quickly see a wide range of body types and physical beauty that contradicts those modern standards of perfection. I've always been amazed that there are some people that just it doesn't bother them. They don't care, and they know they're not maybe healthy enough, but they don't seem to be bothered by it. Universal truth number 2, wretchedly thin. If you think Austen just impolitely spat in the face of every magazine cover model in the country, wait for the next shocker. According to Jane, thin bodies aren't automatically healthier bodies. In fact, brace yourself, nobody is excessively thin and attractive in Austen world. Take a peek for yourself. In Sense and Sensibility, as Marianne grows quite thin, she also looks very unwell. The same book describes Mrs. Ferrars as a thin woman without beauty. In Pride and Prejudice, Miss de Bourgh is repeatedly called thin and sickly. Who would have thought she could be so thin and small? She looks sickly and cross. In Emma, Miss Bates fears that the once beautiful Jane Fairfax has grown thin and is thus looking very poorly. In Persuasion, a lovesick Anne Elliot had been a very pretty girl, but her bloom had vanished early, and she was now faded and thin. There are more examples, but you're probably growing either confused or uncomfortable. Only proof of how deep-rooted our fashionable thinner is always better mentality has become. And we're not the only ones. Jane's novels were just as uncomfortably counterculture to the fashionable world of Regency England. The early 1800s was one of the first historic periods to embrace a thinness standard as merciless as our own. Both men and women of the era were obsessed with a tubercular look, with forcing their bodies into an unnatural state of thinness that could only be achieved through starvation or sickness, to literally look as if they had tuberculosis. Even Marianne gets caught up in the craze, in Sense and Sensibility. Confess, Marianne, says Eleanor, is not there something interesting to you in the flushed cheek, hollow eye, and quick pulse of a fever? Certainly an eerie foreshadowing of the hollow eyes and sickly figures strutting across our fashion runways today. It's terrible, isn't it? Austen clearly comprehended, it would be really neat at some of these fashion shows where you have these very hollow-eyed, sickly-looking models walking past, both men and women, to bring some pie to the show and offer them pies afterwards instead of flowers. Austen clearly comprehended how dangerous these ideas are. As she points out in Northanger Abbey, there is such a thing as being wretchedly thin, a biological state as harmful to our health as to our happiness. We can just as easily be screwed out of health, yep, Jane said screwed, by too little fat on our bodies as by too much. Our brains need a healthy amount of fat to keep us cognitively alive. And I could tell you all about how doctors will test your fat and say you're too high in cholesterol, and they don't realize that a lot of it's based on the body of a 25-year-old, and they try to average it out. But as you get older, you do need more fat for your brain, and you cannot pay attention to these levels of things. You have to feel good, and that is the main point. The same goes for every hard-working cell in our bodies. It's why Austen constantly stresses body moderation in her novels, and why a healthier and more beautiful Jane Fairfax is delightfully described as Emma in a most becoming medium between fat and thin. Emma instinctively knows that this natural-shaped femininity makes Jane Fairfax a serious romantic rival in the novel, an observation still perfectly accurate today. A large 2012 poll conducted by Britain's Grazia magazine found that modern men still hardly agree with their Austen male counterparts, preferring the natural beauty of naturally shaped women over the skin and bones slightness of size zeros. Lizzie understands it so well. The thought of Darcy having to marry and kiss the sunken cheeks of Mr. Berg fills her with girlish glee. She looks sickly and so thin, says Lizzie, stifling a laugh. Yes, she will do for him very well. So I'm going to read the last of this page and then move on to something else. A changing heroine. Even the film versions of Pride and Prejudice reflect how rapidly and irrationally our modern body ideals are shrinking. In 1995, those are the versions I like to watch, BBC's miniseries featured a beautiful and naturally curvy Jennifer L. in the role of Elizabeth Bennet. 10 years later, Elizabeth was dramatically sized down into the ultra-thin runway physique of actress Keira Knightley. Deciding which version of Austen would have preferred, I leave it to my readers to determine. And so there was one thing that came up this morning when I was trying to write down some notes and think about, was that I will try to include a link from Dr. Berg. He only speaks about 2 minutes on his little videos. I'll try to include a link which explains somewhat why people wake up in the morning already tense. Do you get tired of this? You wake up in the morning, you've had a good night's sleep, you think you have, and you wake up in the morning, and as soon as your eyes open, you start to feel the flood of the pressures of life right in the beginning. And he explains what it might be a symptom of, and a lack of, and how to get it back. And one of the things that I read to you in this was this chapter on light. And so Dr. Berg reflects what this man said on Jane Austen's light, not to have light in your room all the time, and to let the natural darkness come in, and to sleep in natural darkness without light in your eye, without anything turned on. And he explains this. So I'll try to include that link because it kind of goes along with what I was reading a few days ago in this book. So now I have finished my reading and kind of finished the homeschool lesson. So if you'd like to go on to something else, you may. I'm going to talk a little bit longer now about some things at home, and things that will help women at home, or maybe even men at home, is number one, to remember to take care of yourself. This is so important, and a lot of us think, especially if you are taught to serve others, to care for others, and to think of being great or having greatness in your life, you might forget to take care of yourself. But this is the tool that you're going to use if you're going to do anything great. So remember to take care of yourself, and this includes going for some fresh air and a little walk. And I have put away all the exercise equipment, and I'm just using walking now, and I will, tune in sometime. I like Fabulous 50s, her stretches and her chair exercises, and I'll tune into that once in a while. But for the most part now, I'm not using my trampoline or weights or anything like that. But this is part of taking care of yourself. Spend 5 minutes outside, or spend a few minutes just doing some stretches. It does change your thinking, and it changes your mind. And also, if you wake up weary, besides listening to the link that I'm going to put on there about, and if you could go back a few videos ago where I read the chapter on light, on how natural light is so important. And you can also remember to pray, because so many times we pray at last instead of at first, and we neglect the greatest source of our comfort and strength, the greatest source. And one thing we can pray for these days is some relief from the craziness that's going on in the world that's interfering with our daily life. All of us are missing just normal, being able to walk into the shops and get what you want and observe what's new. It's kind of stimulating. We used to like to go to market and see what was new in the spring, and the foods, and just anything new that was coming out. And we bring this into our home. It backed up what we were doing at home. It was easy to go out and shop for the home because we wanted to make the comforts better. And so the prayer, if you spend any anxiety that comes to you, I've often said, just go to prayer. And someone said to me, well, I'd be going 40 times a day. That's okay. Go 40 times a day. Every time an anxious thought or anxiety comes to you, just snap back into prayer. And pretty soon, you'll be training your mind to take those bad thoughts and scary things that come into your mind, and right away treat them with prayer. It's like treating a disease with a great physician. And so we have this great source of confidence and strength and comfort and strength that we neglect so badly. And it's quicker than email. It's easier than a doctor's appointment. And you look at who's benefiting from, it's always interesting in a war to see who benefits. But you look who's benefiting from all this. First of all, a lot of people were cut off of communication. So who got the most benefit from it? It was the phone companies and online ordering. They benefited financially greatly from this. But who else benefits from it? Well, therapists and hospitals, and because people were just breaking down physically and mentally. So there's another benefit too, someone else. And it's never the good guys that benefit. It's the ones that are going to use it wrongly. So remember to take care of yourself. Your exercise, your water, your tea, your hot tea, your your reading and your studying, and take an art lesson. Just go to YouTube somewhere and find somebody has posted an art lesson and just watch it. And you don't have to actually do it. Do things like that can really improve you. Learn to do something that you don't know much about, or just curiously look into it, see how it works, and keep your brain sharp. Also, I was going to tell you something about the culture, about creating a culture. I talked to you about culture last time or the time before, and that is, People used to say, or experts used to say, that you're a reflection of your home. You're the way you act, your manners, the way you dress, the way that you behave, and your work, it reflects your home. But actually, it was a lie, because people sent their children away from home most of the day for public education or even private education. And so they're no longer being a reflection of their home and their family and their parents' values. They are absorbed in what that school wants them to be absorbed in. So they're not a reflection of their home. So if you want to be a reflection of your family and of your home, then home is where the culture will be. This is where you'll do your greatest learning and your greatest training. And you could even develop your own teaching source, your own teaching manuals at home. So think about that too. Are we really a reflection of our homes, or are we a reflection of society around us? We will be influenced by the people we are around the most. Think about this. Do you want your children around other people who don't share your values and your appreciation of life? You can never get that from a teacher that doesn't know you, doesn't know your family, doesn't know. I was talking to someone the other day about doctors and how they used to make house calls, and so they could make a better diagnosis because they could come to your house and they could observe the cleanliness, they could observe what's going on in the home and what kind of food they had, what kind of comforts they had, whether the home needed to be heated better or whatever, and or what kind of rooms the children were being kept in. They could observe all this and they could make better admonitions for their health. And we also need home schooling. If you want to be a teacher and you want to go into someone's home, you could also be hired as a tutor. I honestly think that it's better if the mother is the teacher. I really do. And she can teach them how to learn by themselves too. You don't have to stand over your children from kindergarten up through 12 and teach all those years, because what you do is you give them the tools in the beginning. Remember, 26 letters of the alphabet with 44 sounds. Make some little cards, what we call flashcards. And I learned that from a book called The Writing Road to Reading. I think the last name of the author was Spalding. I'm not sure. Now, it's a bit complicated to read at first, but I just ignored the instructions at the beginning and went straight to the little flashcards, and then also to the workbook, where it showed that as they learn a letter, they write it, and then they say it, and their mouth moves into the shape of the letter, like, oh. And I thought that was just fascinating. And so that's just one method, but many of us learn to read and write just by knowing the puzzle or the system, or it's a little mystery that's unlocked by the sounds. And so you can be a reflection of your own home only if you are home. And children are not a reflection of their families if they're away from their families during the most impressionable hours of the day. I just have a few notes here that I'll... I wanted to also mention that this idea that I had read, well, we all know it's always healthy to go outside, but when he described the Jane Austen world, where they went outside and appreciated what they saw, the colors, it reminded me of my children that would get up in the morning on the ranch that we lived on in Texas, and they couldn't wait to get outside to see what was going on, what was new, what the light was like, what the birds were saying, what animals had come forward, and where the cows were, and just looking around and listening and observing it. Well, this brings us back to this childlike way of observing life. And one of the advantages of it, going outside, breathing, walking, even just standing on the front stoop of the front porch in the rain, because you can't walk, just going out there for a minute with a cup of tea, can advance the clarity you experience. And so I have noticed, the more I have removed myself from the world's agenda, from listening to their media, from watching their there are movies, and from going into town so much to shop, the more clarity I've had, the more relaxed I have become, and the more determined I am, and the more focused I am, and the more driven I am for my own plans and dreams. When you have to work for somebody else, or when you are thinking about the world, you're trying to please everybody else. But when you stop doing that and start living in a healthful way, you develop more clarity. Well, I also wanted to tell you that it frees you. We talk about bodies, being toxic, and how eating fresh stuff can detoxify your body. There are also detox teas you can drink, and one of the best ones is dandelion tea. I suppose you could make your own from dandelions outside, but now they are selling it. And there was a chapter in here I haven't read yet to you, but it talks about dandelions for the tea for cleansing the liver. In Jane Austen's time, they knew this. Well, now that's what some of the naturopaths recommend for liver problems, is the liver cleanse from the dandelions. So we aren't that far advanced. People knew a lot more than we think they did. But it also we talk about detoxing the body, but when you focus on things that are good and lovely and pure, like Philippians 4:8 says, and you read good things and you learn about the creation and about your body and about manners and about speech and about, maybe you want to learn to sing. You can find now these days a video with free instruction on it, on how to sing. You can learn to compose. You can learn so much, and you have got to do Philippians 4:8. Think on things that are lovely, good, pure, just, and of value, of virtue, because it cleanses your mind, and you no longer have a toxic mind. We've talked about toxic bodies. What about toxic minds? Your mind becomes toxic from all this junk that you're fed through the media and telling you what you should be and what you should be doing, and you don't get a feeling, a vision of what you're best at, what you can best do, and you can get back your instincts. You can get back that feeling of the balance of scales of between what's most beneficial and what's not beneficial to you, so you can free yourself from the toxic mind. You can have a mind cleanse, and so I hope that this has been somewhat valuable to you. Let me just look over my notes and see if there's anything else that I have left out. I want to remind you that in moments of feeling of discouragement or downright madness, to feed your mind on God and on worship. And that's the perfect time to turn around and start praising and praying God and singing a hymn. It doesn't actually feel like that's something that you could do that's natural, but in times of discouragement and just maybe confusion, just right away go to singing something. Now, I've said before, you can turn on a hymn and listen to it, and it can give you some comfort. You can listen to the radio all day long. There's something different about singing by yourself in your kitchen or out in your garden or up in your sewing room or just around the place. And we become so self-conscious of our own voices because even in churches, there are some singers that are just almost operatic. They're so professional, but it makes us feel self-conscious. And I think it's really important to sing. See what that does for your mind. See what that does for you, that we do a lot more of things ourselves instead of letting the world do it for us. And so in times of, I'll just repeat that, in times of discouragement or feelings of confusion, keep your mind on worship. Start singing and start praying and start praising, and just automatically go there and don't give in to it. So today I don't have a mandate for you except to try and do something creative with your brown paper And because actually, this might become a culture. Who knows? Because actually, we need to learn how to make things without having to depend on buying everything. And so, learn to make something that you would normally have to buy. So that's my mandate for today. And don't live a robotic life and reject the way that society wants to put you through a certain way of going, and learn about the home and how it functions. And the best way to learn is to spend some time at home and observe. What's it like at bedtime? What's it like when you wake up? What's it like at midday? And learn every corner of the home and learn how you can best serve others and serve yourself and serve your children that way. So ladies, I appreciate your comments a lot. They really keep me going. And I wanted to thank you all for listening and for coming here. And I hope to see you again sooner. Bye.